Hello Animals fans and welcome back to the Animals Reviews YouTube channel. Today we're doing another AniLysis and it's on this chap here. This, if you didn't already know, is a character from Animorphs. But he's not most famous for being an Animorphs. He's actually most famous for being a king of England. It's King Henry V. And he comes only in one book, and funnily enough it's the time travel one. It's Megamorphs 3 Elfangor's Secret. How do the Animorphs, in any world, encounter this cheeky royal sod? Let's find out the context for how the Animorphs got introduced to King Henry V of England. Hi Lila. A deal. And here it is. The 6 of you will be allowed to follow the time matrix. The former Visiphore set off on his journey 2 days ago. You will be translated back to that point, and then the quanta that make up your atoms will be tuned. Yes, that's a good word for simple minds to comprehend. You'll be fine-tuned at the subatomic level to resonate with the movements of the time matrix as it travels through time. Your own memories and personalities will, of course, be buffered, protected against the changes. The Drode appears as the Animals are in this weird alternate reality where they're all basically Nazis. And he says, well, we could sort this out. It's Visiphore actually, he's got the time matrix, that cheeky sod, and he's buggered off through history, so you Animals had better go follow him. Bit of cat and mouse, that sort of thing. That's what the Drode cousin said to the Animorphs, and so the Animorphs eventually agree and travel back in time. And the first place they end up is a little thing called the Battle of Agincourt. And they first meet up with some damn Frenchies. Bloody frog kisses. It is the year of our Lord 1315. The forces of the Royal de France, His Highness Royal Charles VI, under command of Constable de France and Princes of the Blood Royal, and here unis pur, to repel l'invasion, Roy Henry V of England, who has laid claim unjust to the throne of France. Firstly, apologies for the French accent, or what I probably would just about barely call a French accent. So the Animals are put back into the year 1415 in France, and if you know anything about your history, that's when the Battle of Agincourt took place. Essentially what happened is, King Henry V over here decided to go invade France because why the fuck not? Sorry, I should stop swearing. Why the ruddy heck not? And he goes there and they take a castle, Hérault or something like that, on the northern coast of France. And all his buddies, all his council say, we've lost a lot of people here, we should probably go back and recuperate in England. But Henry V was like, actually no, I'm not going to do that, because that will give them the chance to recuperate as well. So what he does is he wants to march up to near Belgium. He's going to go along the coast. But the French anticipate that and cut them off. So Henry V and his lot have to come, cut into France, come inland and go around them. Which means that what could have been a 20-minute car journey turns into a 4-hour car journey. But they're not driving in cars, they're freaking walking with armour and all that sort of stuff. So they're out there for a long time when they've got the diseases and all that sort of stuff. And that's sort of covered in Megamorphs 3. We'll talk briefly about that in the quotes. But essentially, it's a long march through France, circling around where they believe the Frenchies are, the bloody frogs. And they come around, but the French intercept and they meet at Agincourt, the fields of Agincourt, and that's where the Battle of Agincourt takes place. And that's where the Animorphs have jumped to. So they've arrived at night. So at this point, the French and the English are camped on the opposite ends of this massive field. They're all in their tents and whatnot, and then the next morning they were going to come marching at each other. You'll notice in the quotes come in this one, that it's pouring down with rain. Now that's very important for the Battle of Agincourt, because it was that allowed King Henry to win the battle. Long story short, he saw that the field was absolutely sodden wet and he thought, they've got a lot of cavalry and they won't be able to move very quickly. We've got a heck ton of archers. So what we'll do, we'll move forward a bit, stop. As soon as they start to move forward, they'll continue marching forward, basically taunting them on. And as soon as they get close enough, just unleash the archers. Just wham, bammo. Poke your eyes out, thank you, ma'am. That sort of thing. And then the French come, the archers swoop in around in a big like hug motion. And they won the battle with very few casualties. The numbers are estimates at best. But anyway, let's get back to specifics about Animorphs. I've given you the overview of Agincourt. Let's talk about the Animorphs trying to find Henry V and observing Agincourt on the morning that it's happening. I was over the English camp for about the 20th time. The head guys, including this guy I thought might be the king, were attending an old-fashioned mass. You know, in Latin. The third mass. It made me wonder if they had any hope of winning. I mean, one church service maybe, but 3? That's not a sign of confidence. That's more like, I'll be there any minute now, Lord, so have St. Peter make up my bed. The guys themselves, knights, soldiers, archers and so on, were a nasty looking bunch of humans. No one looked like they had washed their clothes any time this century. Faces were dirty, teeth were rotted, and I mean yellow and black, gnarled looking rotted. There were pompous, swaggering knights and whatever, who had literally 4.5 teeth in their whole head. The sun was rising above the horizon now. The mass was breaking up. It didn't look like they'd have another. I guess 3 were enough. The guy I thought was probably the English king was hanging out with some of his boys, all laughing very loudly the way people do when they're scared peeless, but want to look cool. I took a look at him. No, he did not have a 21st century body. He was about as skanky as anyone. I checked out his boys, a bunch of burly looking troublemakers. I guess they were his main knights. But if it hadn't been for the chainmail and the swords, you'd have figured them for a bunch of mafia hitmen. They weren't all buff like some Schwarzenegger action hero. Most were beefy, even fat. I doubted any of these guys had ever heard the word salad. But they weren't fat. They were like, aha, your blade merely penetrated my belly fat and 1 kidney, a flesh wound. Have at you, sir. These boys were trouble. The aim of the Animorphs is to find Visser IV, and they eventually figure out, look for a guy who isn't looking like he's just walked 200 miles over sodden French countryside. And they find out pretty quickly that it's not the king, and they actually they find out who the king is basically by what you've just heard in that quote. Basically, who's the guy who's talking a lot, hanging around with the big boys, and looks like he's in charge. And they get it right. They find King Henry V. Will say as well, don't like the use of the word fat. If it's anything like goosebumps, I want that changed to cheerful, or jolly, or something like that. So, yeah, they weren't built like Schwarzenegger, they were cheerful. So King Henry V and his very cheerful men eventually have to go into battle. And they won't be very cheerful for long. But they have to have a bit of a speech first. And this is where we truly know that we've identified King Henry V and they're about to go into battle. And now the king was talking to his troops. He jumped up on a fallen tree and started bellowing and waving his arms like a politician or a football coach. I couldn't hear everything he said, but the basic idea was, men, we're outnumbered, but we're here for a good reason, which is that I want to be King of France. So let's go kick some French butt and we'll all be mighty pleased with ourselves on the off chance that we actually survive. Basically, the same kind of heroic nonsense we Animorphs tell ourselves before we go into battle. Firstly, I just want to point out, I like this little bit here, because if you remember book 47, and Jake wants to address the Hawk-Brigadier, what does he do? He climbs a tree. And I've just, doing this research, I looked at this part and thought, that's funny. It's Jake emulating what he saw from King Charles V. King Charles? King Henry V. Have I been saying Charles a lot? Can't remember. It's King Henry V. Why did I say Charles? It's Charles III we're on right now. Wonder what the sequel to him's going to be. So yeah, King Henry V. They're all outnumbered, but they're going to eventually be successful. And the animals are going to join that battle. But they're not going to be too interested in what's going on in the battle per se. They're more interested in finding their Visser 4 target. And they eventually think that they find him just as the battle's getting underway. Then, quite suddenly, I saw him. Not a knight. One of the archers. He was carrying a bow and a quiver full of arrows. He was with a bunch of archers moving toward the French lines. Many of the English archers on both wings of the battle had laid down their bows and were drawing swords and daggers. Visser 4 was not a part of this slaughter. He had backed away from the battle into the trees, and now he appeared to be climbing a tall tree. "Prince Jake," I cried, "Visser 4 is in a tree. I believe he is preparing to use his bow." I tried to stay focused on Visser 4. As I swept in a low circle above the field of battle, I trained my osprey eyes on his blue human eyes. They searched the crowd, then found what they sought. I tried to extrapolate, to follow the direction of his gaze. It was an accurate guess at first, but I believe I saw what he was watching. In the midst of the English lines was a warrior wearing a dented gold ring atop his helmet. Many men in armour were close to him. There were several bright flags near him. "The human with the gold circle on his head," I asked. "Is he important?" "Gold circle?" Prince Jake asked in a frazzled, distracted voice. "You mean a crown?" "Possibly. It is gold and formed into what may be an abstract floral design." "That's the king! The English king!" "He will be shot with an arrow very soon," I said. "Visser 4 is drawing his bow and I believe he is aiming it at this king." "Get him!" Prince Jake yelled. It then becomes a moment of truth sort of thing. Visser 4 is about to unleash this bow. And Axe is swooping in, or was it Tobias? I think it might have been Tobias actually in this case. It changes chapters, it's a Megamorph book, so we had Axe narrating and I think he now sends Tobias in to go sort out this Visser 4 before he can kill King Henry V. Too late. The arrow flew straight toward King Henry. Straight into the back of a young French soldier who felt like someone had cut his legs off. A miss. Of course. Visser 4 was no expert archer, and it was a tough target. The king's face was uncovered. That had to be the target. A professional archer could have done it from this range, but not a novice. Still. Visser 4 drew his bow again. He aimed very carefully, and now the king was surging toward the very place where Rachel and the others lay. I saw Visser 4's fingers begin to relax. I saw the fingers release. The arrow flew. I opened my talons and twisted sideways to bring both talons into line. Flit! Flap! Talon hit arrow. Right talon hit but didn't grip. I blew straight down, my momentum carrying the arrow with it, cancelling some of its speed. Left talon squeezed. I felt the shaft slide through my grip. My talons closed around the feathered ailerons. It all took 1/10 of a second. Then I was carrying the arrow. So Tobias saves King Henry V, who gallantly charged into battle as he defeats the French. You may notice in that quote there that the animals are in the midst of this battle and they're not doing too good. And I think is it Rachel and Marco are in the middle, sort of almost getting crushed by this battle going on. And there's a brilliant scene in here where Tobias rides in on a horse as a Hork-Bajir, essentially. And that's the last we really see of King Henry, because he sees this and thinks, what the ruddy heck is going on here? Here's the quote. Then, above all the clashing, yelling, horrific sounds of battle, I heard a new note. Screams of sheer terror. Screams like you'd hear from someone trapped in a nightmare. Feet stampeded. The king himself stood over me, recognisable for the dented golden crown on his head. He was staring off to the right, gaping, mouth open, battle temporarily forgotten. The knight he had been fighting sagged to his knees and began crossing himself and praying. Battle lines fell back. The king thought about it for a few seconds and decided he didn't want to go one-on-one with what was coming either. And the devil, or what must have surely looked like a devil to these men of the 15th century, rode onto the field atop a magnificent warhorse. "Am I seeing a halberdier riding a horse?" Marco asked. That's where we leave the king, being shocked by a halberdier riding a horse. So when did we first establish that this was the Battle of Agincourt? Well, here's the quote where it's first mentioned, where whoever's narrating at the time, I should remember. After a brief bit of research, I found out that it's Cassie who first recognises this as the Battle of Agincourt. At least that's what her internal monologue tells us. And she realises how big of a battle it truly was. This, I would later learn, was the Battle of Agincourt, one of the great battles of history. Glorious. That's what people called it. Glorious. Shakespeare wrote a play about it. When we get to the end of Megamorphs 3, we find John Berryman, who is the host of Visser 4. Visser 4 is killed, leaving the host to speak to the Animorphs as himself. And the Animorphs have a few burning questions for him, namely, what Visser 4's plan was. Now, it's largely about changing human history and making everything easier for the Yeerks to invade. But why Agincourt? Why did Visser 4 travel to the Battle of Agincourt? Well, it's for a different reason, and we're given the details. "Don't know how you did it," he rasped. "Following him through time. He was trying to change the world. Bitter, very bitter. Change time, make humans weaker, easier to conquer, then replace Visser 3. But it was too complicated for him. He didn't realise. Landed here, expected Nazis, told the Germans this was the main invasion, rushed the tanks forward, only different Germans. They arrested him. Too complicated, see? It was too complicated for us too. Wanted to kill Washington. Wanted to change Trafalgar. Kill Einstein. Push the Allies back into the sea at D-Day. Other plans too. But you made him rush, panicked him. Why Agincourt? Tobias asked. John Berryman laughed. That was for me. It was to shut me up. I never gave up, see. I fought him. All night I'd keep it up. Keep it up in his head. Keep what up? Marco asked. Shakespeare. I played Exeter in the play, but I memorised all the lines. I shook my head. I don't get it. Henry V. I know it by heart. Shakespeare wrote a play about Henry at Agincourt. Visser 4 couldn't figure out how or when to intercept Shakespeare. Not enough definite data. So he was going to kill Henry to silence Shakespeare. To silence me. So the entire reason Visser 4 went to the Battle of Agincourt was just to shut his host up. That's why we met Henry V in Animorphs. Just so John Berryman would shut the heck up. But I love this book, I love this scene, and I love Henry V because he was one of England's greatest kings. He's not my favourite. Henry I is my favourite. But he's up there. I mean, come on. You don't get... When was the last time a king rode into battle who was on the front lines? It doesn't happen very often, you know. There's a bit of bravado about that, you know. British spirit. That's something you Americans don't know about. You probably do, actually. But whatever. This is a British channel. Even though my demographics are like 95% American, it's still a British channel, damn it! And that's an English king if I ever saw one. Look at that haircut. I bet not a single American can pull that off. Not like my boy Henry over here. We're bezies, even though he died many hundreds of years ago. We're bezies. Right. I hope you've learnt your lesson. And I hope you've learnt enough about King Henry V as he appeared in the Animorphs series. This has been another episode of AniLysis. The next one is going to be on the 3 unfortunate chaps who were inside the pillar hologram in book 21. That's the next AniLysis. I shall see you then. Ta-ra!